All right, so I thought I would kick off another one of these videos about the different versions I've had of this tool as I've been getting started. So I used to listen a lot to That Will Never Work. It's a podcast by Mark Randolph. He was one of the founders of Netflix initially, and everyone would say, "Oh, that would never work. You don't like that Netflix concept, not going to work." A lot of the advice he was giving on his podcast was about how to start with a very P version. And a lot of people would come on there and say, "Hey, I want to build an app for XYZ." And he'd be like, well, is there any way that you can do this without actually building the app? Can you use a spreadsheet? Can you use manually do this work? Just to product validate it. And sometimes you can even work out some of the process workflows and stuff in that too, so that when you do go to build your app, the most optimized process or organization for it, which is kind of exactly what I did. I started off building with Airtable and Make and Creatomate. There's some videos on my channel kind of on how I put that all together, which we'll briefly look at today. Then I went and looked at Glide. It's a low-code builder, builds mobile apps. Again, I actually ended up building the full MVP, had some people test it on Glide, and which worked pretty well. But the layout and the customizations, it wasn't what I wanted, and the pricing structure wasn't super great either. And then now I'm going ahead full on with Bubble, which is another no-code tool, but it can incorporate some code, which is pretty cool. And then also it allows for way more customizations, which makes it more complicated, but I enjoy it more. So let's dive right in here and I'll show you the overview of the different setups. All right, so let's jump right in here. This is my version in Airtable that I was building. And you can see there's a lot of different iterations or tabs along the top here. They don't all necessarily come into play, but they could come into play. And so that's what I really liked about Airtable. It was just very customizable. It was quick for me to work with and iterate upon. What we're looking at here is just a final approval dashboard where someone can go in, see all of the posts that were generated, and then say, hey, yes, this is approved, not approved, needs some review. You can edit the captions and stuff that were going to be posted with it and things like that. It was a pretty cool tool. It allowed for some blog research articles where we could go and pull top ranking articles for different topics. Helps me develop a lot of different questions or prompts for related content, things like that. Airtable now has AI built in as well. At the time I was using make.com to generate all of this. It allowed me to do a overall post here too, just a content calendar, so I could keep track of what was being posted. Even click this button and it would go out and it would post automatically to my social media. It was tricky. Most social schedulers allow you to have a post at 10:15 exactly. This was a struggle to do that. There are workarounds for it, but again, it's not the purpose-built tool for this specifically. The other thing that was kind of a pain too was all of these Creatomate templates. So I used another third platform called Creatomate, and I had to develop templates. I had to mark down all of the template IDs. I had to make sure all of the data points in each template were filled and being sent, and that was pretty complicated. It actually, in order to edit and fill those, you had to go in here and go and edit JSON data, which for me being fairly technical, it's not too tricky to just change this headline around and change this around. But obviously that's not going to be the most user-friendly way of doing it. And even if you mess things up and you forget to add in a quote, or maybe you have an extra quote in your paragraph, if you put two quotes there, the whole thing is going to mess up. It's not going to work. So it's not a super great platform for that kind of a thing. But it did get me started. It was pretty customizable. Another spot, I guess, to kind of show you. So with Airtable, I had to use make.com to do some of these automations. If you just check out how incredibly complicated this one is in order to generate different types of content. Granted, each of these lines here do generate a different post with a different type of content, but it gets pretty complicated. And the other factor too is with Make, I had to always have a client connect me to their social media accounts. There was no authentication way that I could have them just authenticate and be able to post automatically like that, obviously just due to how it all is structured. But that was another kind of sticking hiccup point that didn't go super well with this. Then I moved over into Glide. And the reason I went with this is you can easily build apps off of Airtable with Glide. So it's kind of a good in-between stepping point. I actually didn't end up using Airtable as my database for a few different reasons. Every time you update something from Glide to Airtable, there's a cost associated with that. And then it was also much faster just to work everything in Glide. So there's all these databases in here that I ended up having to build. And this one does a lot of different things. It includes YouTube videos and bookmarks and things like that too. So there's a lot of tables here, but it was kind of tricky. And then even with the layout customizations, there's not a lot of options that I can have here, which was kind of frustrating just in the terms of layout. So kind of side scrolling like this, and there's just not a lot of options. It kind of made it difficult to have a really good clean UI, I guess, which was tricky. And then the other biggest factor too was this being able to automatically schedule. If you're going to build a social media scheduler, you got to make it easy for people to schedule. And so I did have this whole tap to post thing where people could create their own setup in Make on their own, have it all authenticated on their end, and then they could just easily put in the webhook that it gave them, and they could tap to post, right? But again, it's not a scheduler, which was quite annoying. It did do a lot in terms of social posts. There was a bit of a calendar here. You could do some different blogs. You could upload your images as well in here, and that was pretty great. I also managed to connect it into AI images as well, so you could generate some kind of different related AI images, which was pretty awesome. And then you could also connect in YouTube videos. So if you're watching a YouTube video and you wanted to take some timestamps from that YouTube video and include it in your social or blog posts, you could do that too. The other downside with Glide that I found was actually their pricing model. So for every user that I had in here, it was actually going to be, I think, $4 just to have their email in the system. So that was a little bit of a hang up because obviously you couldn't do free trials or free extended trials for that for very long. And it really just, after a while, tends to eat into your profit margins quite a bit. That was a little bit frustrating too. So then I switched over to Bubble, which is what I'm working on now. As this whole series progresses, I'm going to do a deep dive on each of these sections, how I've been making them, that kind of a thing. But even right off the bat here, you can see nice customization. So I built out this sidebar. I got to choose how these social posts were laid out. I got to do an onboarding thing. So as people go through the onboarding process, it checks this off. It's a lot more customizable that way, right? You can even hide and show this little sidebar. It's super great. This calendar section was super tricky to work on, but basically you can see the different posts you have going. You click on them, you can edit it, see the photos kind of a little bit up close, which is awesome. Choose which platforms it's going to, and it actually schedules that on May 6th at 10:45 a.m., right? Kind of thing. So it's really nice and convenient to update that a little bit more and just give more customization over it, the whole thing. And then there's a lot of features as well in terms of being able to see usage and how many posts are being created, sending out emails to people. It's tremendously better. I hope that this was kind of helpful. I guess if you're one of those people who's deciding, hey, what platform should I work with? Where should I get started? This kind of gives you an overview with the same project, essentially, but 3 different ways to build it on different platforms.